I'm here with Helen Goodsall, a representative from the BDA, the British Dyslexia Association, who is Knowledge and Information Manager. So to start with, could you tell me a little bit about the BDA?
Okay, so we're a national dyslexia charity. We were first started in 1972, so we've been going over 50 years. Our job really is to help raise awareness and understanding of dyslexia. We do that through various training sessions and free webinars, etc. And we also, our vision really is to see everybody with dyslexia flourish. So we are responsible for making sure that specialist teacher training standards are set, and that also we're there to represent the voice of dyslexic people. So we will put out campaigns and we actually work sort of with parliamentary teams to try and get policy changed.
Yeah. So what specific services does the association offer for teachers in particular?
Okay, so we offer a range of training for teachers. So we have various levels of training. We have what we would call our sort of level 2 and level 3. So that's really for classroom teachers and teaching assistants. And that's about getting them to understand how dyslexia impacts people in the classroom, so sort of basic awareness, and then how they can make changes to their existing teaching to support dyslexic children in the classroom. And then we also run sort of professional level training, which is for those who want to study sort of postgraduate training to study to be a specialist teacher, so they can support people one-to-one with specialist interventions, and those that want to be a specialist dyslexia assessor as well.
Yeah. If there are teachers or similar professionals out there who would like to consider becoming dyslexia specialists in either assessing or screening individuals for dyslexia, looking to become a special educational needs teacher, does your organisation offer training or support with that?
Yes, it does, through its level 5 and level 7 courses. People can do that sort of as an online course, so it's something that a lot of people do in addition to sort of working during the day. You know, they kind of do part-time study over a few years or so to actually get a level 5 or a level 7 qualification. The level 5 is kind of the first level, that it's actually understanding about, you know, the real detail of dyslexia and the interventions to support people. And then a lot of people go on to do a level 7, which then enables them to understand how to carry out diagnostic assessments so they can actually diagnose dyslexia.
Oh, okay. And there will be people watching this who have children or family members who they suspect might have dyslexia. Perhaps there are reasons why they haven't been screened yet. How can your association help those families?
Okay, so it's not uncommon for children to have not been screened, and even less likely that children will have been diagnosed, because assessments need to be privately funded. Children in schools should be being supported even without a diagnosis, and a lot of schools will undertake their own screening tests. We have a helpline which people can call free of charge to actually ask specific questions, but the sort of things that we get asked on that really are about people understanding what are the first steps. And we would always say to parents, go and talk to the children's teacher, understand what's going on in school, understand your concerns in terms of what you've seen and why you think they might be dyslexic. If there's dyslexia in the family, it's much more likely that difficulties that a child might be displaying are because they're dyslexic, than if you're from a family where there's no history of that. So I think the first stage is to kind of speak to the school. We can also offer kind of support and signposting for people who do decide that they want to go on and pay for a diagnostic assessment for a child.
Yeah.
And we also have access to tutors who are qualified level 5 teachers who are there to support people that want to do that. We also have a number of local dyslexia associations, so some of those will run sort of workshops for children, or they can provide support in the local area. So there's a lot of information on our website, and also so through our helpline as kind of the first point of entry for people.
Yeah. I understand that you support organisations and employees too. So how can your association help HR departments or employers in the workplace?
Okay, so we run training not just for teachers, but we also run training for workplaces. So some of that is sort of basic awareness training, understanding about dyslexia and how it impacts people in the workplace. And then we'll also talk to people about sort of reasonable adjustments that can be made in a workplace to support people. So that might be simple things like giving written and verbal instructions so that people have kind of got both. It might be about the sort of technology that's available to help people. Increasingly, there's a lot more technology built into just sort of standard Microsoft programs. So it's making people aware of, screen reading and things that are there, dictation that's there as standard. And then we also have a scheme, which is our quality mark, which is for organisations that really want to be dyslexia friendly. And they kind of go through a process of accrediting themselves to actually demonstrate that they've changed a lot of their practices so that actually they are really supporting dyslexic people in the workplace.
Yeah. So for those who have a diagnosis, what support can you offer to them as individuals?
Okay, so we don't work with people individually. Sadly, we don't really have the resources to do that. So we have free webinars that we run on various topics, so people can kind of watch those to find out about a certain thing. So if you're an adult in the workplace, you might want to find out about support that's available. If you're a parent, you might want to find out about how to support your child with things like reading or learning times tables or whatever it is. And then really what we also do is kind of signpost people to where they might find extra support. So through to local dyslexia associations or through to specialist support that can help them in the workplace, or people that can offer them training or tutoring or whatever it is they're looking for. We signpost onwards.
Oh, okay. Some people might be put off education or professional training due to exams. Once a diagnosis is made, can you give me some general examples of the exam access arrangements that might be considered appropriate to support people?
Yeah, so there's lots of reasonable adjustments that can be made to try and level the playing field. One of the most popular ones is kind of 25% extra time. And these are quite often given to people because dyslexic people generally process information slower, or they read slower, or they need to read things more than once. So 25% extra time is... Sorry, you...
And need that little bit more of extra time.
They do, just to actually, to be able to complete things in that time. There's also things like being able to use a screen reader so that actually the words are read out to you on a screen, or a human reader. Some exams, particularly things like maths exams or those where they've got lots of terminology, sometimes don't work really well with screen readers. So you actually have a human who's reading questions to you. Obviously, they can't read things if it's testing your ability to be able to read, but they can read questions and things and anything else. And then there'll be other things. Some people need rest breaks. It might be on the basis of attention, that they kind of need that break to be able to stop, focus themselves again and then start. Or it might be that actually, if you're doing a really long exam and you've got 25% extra time, that can be a hugely long exam. So sometimes having a rest break during that time, just for 5 minutes or so, then starting the exam again. So all of those kind of things can be really useful for people.
Yeah, I get both those, so yeah, they are definitely useful. Dyslexia affects people in different ways. What would you say might be the key indicators that someone watching this today should perhaps prompt them to speak to their child's school or education institution? Because some of those people might be in college or university. What should alert them to the possibility that their child has dyslexia?
I think it's about, so obviously if you've got some concerns about your child in terms of their happiness or whatever at school, if they're really not settled, if it looks like they might be struggling with something, usually one of the first signs is that somebody's quite strong verbally. So, if you're talking to them, you have absolutely no idea that they might be dyslexic. and then they might struggle when they go to school to learn to read or whatever. And it's a really unexpected struggle because, you know, you kind of listen to them, they can tell you about anything. They're, you know, you can see that they have that ability. So it's a sort of unexpected thing. It's like, why are they really struggling to do it? And I think, you know, that's one of the first signs. But with young children, there can be lots of things. So one of the things that we know is that children who struggle with speech and language, maybe are later to talk, might find it difficult to learn nursery rhymes, can't sometimes repeat words back to you, or they kind of mispronounce them even if you say a word to them. All of those things can be really early indicators of dyslexia. And I think over time, it's kind of building a picture. So as you start to go on further in school, there's kind of more things that become apparent. Children themselves start to realise that they find things so much harder than their friends. And as you say, some people do get through to university or so without being diagnosed. But actually, usually a diagnosis then doesn't come as a surprise to somebody because it explains why they've always found things so much harder than somebody else to do. But only particular things. It's not everything that they find difficult. So it's usually tasks that, you know, require reading or writing, or that they spend so much longer, they work so much harder, they spend so much longer trying to complete information, you know, and work than other people do.
Yeah. I've spoken to older people who were pretty much written off in the past once they were diagnosed with dyslexia. Do you think attitudes towards dyslexia are changing, or are there still people who think that if you're dyslexic, there's no point pursuing anything like education?
I think there is still a stigma with dyslexia, and there's still a huge amount of misunderstanding. And there are still people who think it doesn't really exist. I think it's quite difficult for somebody, for an older person who had a really bad experience at school, to want to go back and study. And it takes a huge amount of courage and support to kind of to overcome that and go back and study, because those kind of feelings that they might have had at school where they didn't know they were dyslexic and maybe their teachers thought they weren't trying hard enough, they were just being lazy, or that they weren't very clever, all of those kind of things stay with people for life. So it can make it really hard. So I think it's not so much that they feel there isn't any point, it's just that actually that real fear of going back and studying again, and it takes a huge amount of support to be able to do so.
Yeah. So I've spoken to a number of teachers who have said that the only training that they received during PGCE qualification was around an hour of awareness training. Would you say the average newly qualified teacher would have a sufficient amount of knowledge to pick up on indications of dyslexia or to support students with it? Or do you think that there could be more that could be done to equip teachers?
Well, I mean, I think we've found the same thing, that actually when you talk to teachers who've done teacher training, there is so little awareness training within initial teacher training. I know it's a difficult one because a lot of the PGCE courses are actually only sort of 9 months, and there's a huge amount that they need to cover to actually put in. But we would say there needs to be far more training to kind of spot dyslexia, even before you actually would say that people also need training in terms of how to change their teaching so that they can actually support dyslexia. So no, I don't think enough is being done. And, you know, as a charity, it's one of the things that we really call upon the government to do, is to improve initial teacher training. And of course, it's not just dyslexia, it's all of neurodiversity and other special educational needs, of which, as you say, there's very, very little time given in teacher training to equip teachers. So I think when they get into the classroom, it must be really difficult, unless they already have some knowledge and understanding from something they've done in the past. It must be really difficult for them to try and spot dyslexic children. And how do you know that a child who's perhaps really frustrated about something because they can't do something because they're dyslexic, how do you know that it's not, you know, just bad behaviour? And how do you actually realise that actually there's some underlying need that really isn't being met?
And if dyslexia was brought to the public's attention on a massive scale, do you think this would actually prompt the whole of the teaching profession to look at how they deliver lessons to dyslexic students?
I think the thing that really stops more being done in education is lack of funding that comes into the schools. And obviously if there was more funding for the teacher training when they went in to start with, and there was more continual professional development training and things, that would make it so much easier to do. And you know, if teachers understood that actually they could quite simply adapt teaching practices to make it so much easier for dyslexic children in the classroom. So I think it's not just awareness, but it's actually putting some things in place to then support those teachers. Because I think a lot of teachers would like to be able to do more to help, but there's a huge pressure on teachers in terms of resources and time, and also the pressure on results, so that so much of teaching pushes people to get through a curriculum so they can put people through for exams. And perhaps there's not always enough time to focus on sort of the needs of all of the children in the classroom.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. It was very informative, and I thank you for your time as well.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, then.